Okay, we're now moving on to the build-up of the frames. I've already done a dry fit on the frames, made all the mistakes I'm going to make, so I've now come back again to go through and build it up for the video. One of the mistakes I did make was not realising that the frames are actually keyed and they can only be built one particular way, and this led to me actually drilling some new holes in this frame because I built it the wrong way originally. Standard kits won't have these two holes here, which are for the governor sensor. But what I've decided is that rather than show you it built up and having to drill holes for the governor sensor, I stripped the machine down and we're going to build it up the correct way so that the governor sensor doesn't need those holes drilling and we can fit it as per the manual. So one thing to be very, very careful of is that you follow the manual exactly in terms of how the frames are laid out on the page and how you install stuff onto them, and which side is to the middle of the machine and which side is to the outside of the machine. So from a machine point of view, this is the right hand frame and everything needs to be built on top of this. And if you get that wrong, then you'll run into the same problems that I did. So important point. But we can now move on, and the first thing I'm going to do is put all of the frame spacers on here. These are the frame spacers. We can put a few of those on. Some of them are actually for the undercarriage struts, and they can't be put on until we install these pieces here to go with them, which are for bolting the struts onto the bottom of the frames. But we'll put on the ones that we can do before we get to those. So I'll go ahead and do that. Okay, so there we have all the ones fitted that we can do without having to bolt something else on. So there are 5 of those, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can see the positions of those. So the next thing I'm going to do is put on the ones that are for the undercarriage struts. So there are 2 there and 2 there, and they have frame spacers this side for them as well. So I'll go ahead and do that. Okay, and there we have those bolted on, and if I just flip this over, you can see them at the bottom there. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to install the little servo guides, these things, and they use these little screws here, and basically the way these work is they go up into the frames, there we go, like that, and then the other one goes to the other side like that. So just give you a better view of that so you can see that there. So they go like that. And basically if you turn this over, you can see that the one this end is on a slot, which allows that to adjust for the size of the servo, and your servos screw into those. And these are just held on with these single screws down here, these little cap head screws. So I'm going to put those on next. Okay, there we go, you can see there those installed. I'll just flip it over, you can see that from the other side. Okay, so that's those in. The next thing I'm going to do is install the front canopy post, and these are on a frame saver. So if I just get a closer shot here so you can see this. There we go. So this is a carbon tab, and then you've got the front canopy post mounted onto that. Then at the back here we've just got a cap-headed screw, and that goes through the frames and into sorry, short pause there because I was looking at the manual and realised that this particular canopy post at the front here is in the wrong place. Shouldn't be there at all. It's supposed to be on our frame saver slightly lower. So our frame saver and front canopy post goes on there like so, and then this one goes on there. So like so, and that's now correct. So apologies there, I just got one of those in the wrong place. Just tighten that up. Okay, that's better. Okay, so that's looking correct now, and we've got our front canopy post with its frame saver mounted up. Okay, next thing is to put the gyro tray and the anti-rotation guide onto the frames, and we use the self-tapping screws for that. Let's give you a close look at this. This isn't a threaded bolt, it's a self-tapping screw into plastic. So the tray here goes up the front there, which is why I was looking at the manual rather strangely and wondering why I'd put that post up there. And the anti-rotation guide goes up the top here, like that. Sorry, so you can see it goes up the top here like that. So I'll bolt those on, you can have a look at that. Okay, and there you can see the anti-rotation guide is on, and the front radio tray mounted up the front there as well. So the last thing that we need to put in here is the motor mount, which goes down the bottom here into these two screw holes here. So I'll just get that. Okay, so here we have our motor mount. One thing to be aware of is that the motor mount is different. One end has got screw holes in it and the other end hasn't. And the end with screw holes in it needs to go towards the bottom of the frames, like so. So that's screw holes to the bottom and it bolts in like that. Okay, so I'll go ahead and install that. Okay, like so, and there we have our motor mount installed. Holes to the bottom, and if I just flick the frames over, you can see what it looks like from the other side. Anti-rotation at the top. So everything installed there, and I believe for page 7 of the manual, that's pretty much everything on there, I think. Oh no, we are missing one more thing, which is the rear canopy post, which goes up here. So I've got that here. So here we have the canopy post. Again, it's got a frame saver mounted onto there, and then a bolt through here to secure it onto the frames. So this literally, this part of the cap head bolt goes into the larger hole at the top here, and the screw goes through there. Like, try and put this in so you can see. It doesn't want to go in, which is usually the case when I try and do anything on camera. Okay, I'll rather than me fiddle with that on camera, I'll put that in and come back and show you. Okay, there we go. You can see we've got the nut on here and the back end of the cap head screw sticking through the frames there. And if I just turn this around, you can see it there, and then that's it from the front, and you can see the piece of carbon frame saver here. So if the canopy gets a big knock, that piece of carbon will break instead of wrecking your canopy. Okay, and the last thing to be installed to complete this build step is these rubber mountings for the tank, and these literally just clip on to the carbon on the sides here, like so, all the way around the tank aperture, so that when you install the tank it's got some vibration cushioning on it to stop fuel foaming and those kinds of problems. So they go in there like that. Okay, so that's all of page 7 done. We'll now move on to page 8, which installs the radio trays and the clutch bell, the bearing blocks, and I think that's pretty much it. That's most of the stuff anyway. So we'll now get on to that. Okay, so first of all, here we have the radio trays, and these actually go up the front of the frames. So bring the frames in here, you can see the frames, and basically these things, they go there and there, like that, and then they're held in place with the self-tapping screws. So I'll go ahead and install those. Okay, so there we have those bolted in place. If I just spin this over, you can see it bolted in place there, and you've got adjustment on these trays as well, so you can adjust how wide these are and bring it narrow together. These are slotted and allow you to adjust the gap here slightly. Okay, so next thing we'll do is we'll put the clutch bell in. First of all, we've got to assemble the clutch bell, which is the next step. Okay, so here's our assembled clutch bell, and we're going to mount this into the frames, and this whole unit kind of fits in there, around about there, and just bolts into place. So I'll go ahead and bolt that in. Okay, so there we go, there's a clutch bell bolted in place. Let's flick this over so you can see there's our 2 bolts holding it in place. The next thing we want to do is install the bearing blocks, the 3 bearing blocks. Oh damn it, I've just realised I put that in the wrong place. You can see here I've installed the frame saver into one of the holes for the bearing block instead of in the hole it should be over here. So I'll just switch that over. Okay, that's better. You can see the nut's in the right place now, and has cleared the hole that I need to use for the upper bearing block there. That's a bit of a schoolboy error there, but spotted, and the reason we have build videos is so I make the mistakes so that you guys don't have to. So next thing we want to do is install the bearing blocks. I'm just going to grab those because the bearing blocks are keyed, and they have some slight differences. So if I just show you, here's the bearing blocks. I'm just going to get a tighter shot on here so you can see this. One of them has some screws in it. That's the bottom bearing block, and it actually goes in that way up with the screws towards the sky. The middle bearing block and the upper bearing block are actually exactly the same, but they do go in different orientations. The middle one goes in like that with the bearing not exposed rather than that way around. So it goes in that way with that towards the sky, so that's the middle bearing block, and then the upper bearing block goes in that way with the bearing exposed rather than unexposed. So that one goes in with the bearing exposed to the sky at the top. So you've got top, middle and bottom. Okay, so I'll now put those into the frames. Okay, so there we have the bearing blocks installed. If I just turn it like this, you can see bottom one with the button screws in it, middle one with the bearing not exposed, top one with the bearing exposed. Switch it around so you can see the screws the other side here. Don't do these up tight at this stage. You want those still loose until you put the main shaft in, and once the main shaft is in, then do those up. Otherwise you'll find that the bearings won't be running nice and true on the shaft. Okay, next task is installing part of the radio tray, and this actually goes into the top of the frames. So I've got the frames here, and I believe this goes something like that in there, like so. So I'll go ahead and install that one. Okay, so there we have the upper tray installed. If I flick this over, you can see how it's mounted on these three screws here. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so the next thing for us to do, I think that's everything actually for that particular part of the build on page 8. I don't think there's anything else left to do there by the looks of things, no. So we're now moving on to page 9 of the build, where we've got to build up the engine, put the fan and clutch assembly onto the engine, and put the fan surround, or the fan shroud, around the engine, and then we can install the engine into the frames. So that's going to be the next task, is installing the engine, building up the engine and then installing the engine into the frames.